The next panel starts now. The next panel starts now.
Good morning, still just the morning. Welcome to the next panel. My name is Edward Luce. I'm the US National Editor of the Financial Times. I'm listed in the little booklet as Dr. Edward Luce, which was a great delight to me to receive an honorary PhD from Abu Dhabi, and I will always now associate Abu Dhabi with my PhD. We've got a complex but a hugely important issue to discuss today, the geofinancial world and the imbalances between geopolitics, where the power is moving to, where it still lies, and geofinance, where the global reserve currency still is, which is the dollar. And I think the implicit question of this panel is the future of the dollar as the global reserve currency. And there are a couple of, before I introduce our distinguished panel, there are a couple of observations I think it's well worth me making at the outset. One is the dollar as the global reserve currency is under some kind of a challenge for two or three reasons. The first is the very natural rise of others. America's share of the global economy is falling, not dramatically, but gradually, and as one would expect with the rise of others. The second is more political, and that is the increasing use by the United States of secondary sanctions, whether it be in East Asia, Russia, Iran, in order to force other countries, third countries, Europe being a very sort of obvious example, to comply with American foreign policy. And this has generated resentment and some discussion of setting up alternative payment systems. And the third sort of chink in the dollar's armor, if you like, is the growth of political instability in the United States, which is not something we're used to discussing and not something that's really been a topic for the better part of the last century since the dollar became the global reserve currency. But the election of Donald Trump, the rise of populism, the fact that we have an American president who's sort of openly attacking the chairman of the Federal Reserve, openly undermining the chair of the Fed, is something new. And therefore, it sort of underlines this question mark that is hanging over the dollar. In terms of alternatives to the dollar, well, none are really commending themselves. I mean, the renminbi, China's currency, remains a fraction of currency reserves held around the world, about 5%, a tiny amount if you compare it to China's weight in the global economy. The yen is declining. The sterling, of course, has long since declined. I've no doubt Boris Johnson can come out tomorrow and say sterling will be the reserve currency again, but I don't think anybody else in the world would see that as a rival. So really we're only talking about two things. One is the euro, which remains much less liquid and much less integrated than the dollar, and therefore has continued to underperform in terms of its share of global reserves. And the other is something completely different, and that is a global digital currency. And I think most of you will have been reading about Mark Zuckerberg's plan to launch something called Libra, a global digital currency, and the controversies that this has generated. So anyway, that's really the context in which we're discussing geopolitics and geofinance. And is one going to catch up with the other? As global power shifts from west to east, will global currency holdings and preferences reflect that geopolitical shift? I've got three excellent people here to talk about it. Let me introduce you each in turn, but with a question with your introduction, starting with Shaukat Aziz on the far left of the panel, former Prime Minister of Pakistan, former Finance Minister of Pakistan, big figure at Citibank, head of Citibank Asia, head of Citibank Middle East, Eastern Europe, most parts of the world you've headed for Citibank. So I think you're a very, very well-placed person to ask just the simple question, but I'm going to ask it to you from a Pakistani perspective, first of all. Pakistan, like most countries, doesn't shape the world it finds. It's a continual client of the IMF. It's going through that whole thing again right now. But you're also very close to the United States, and you're very close to China. Does Pakistan, and do countries like Pakistan, in your experience at Citibank, want to see a more polar currency world, would you like to see the renminbi rival the dollar as a global reserve currency?
Yeah, I think when you look at currencies, you should put your emotions aside and look at realism. The fact is that today in the world, the ecosystem of the world, the US dollar is the only currency with depth and breadth. There are others, euro you mentioned, and many others, renminbi, etc., but they are far from where US dollar is. You can take a dollar in the remotest part of the world and show it to somebody. They'll say, dollar, I'll take it. So that's the name recognition, the power which goes behind the dollar, the ecosystem which covers the dollar is such that no other currency is close to it. If anybody thinks the euro is close to it, they are sadly mistaken. Because the euro is still fragmented. Europe is still, they are one country, but they are not one country. And you need the sovereign behind a currency. The United States of America is one sovereign. So when you take the dollar and put it in your pocket, you get a sense of comfort. Having said that, that does not stop trading or exchange of goods and services through other currencies. That does happen. And, but the primary currency, your question was on that, will remain the dollar. I don't see any other currency really competing with it or threatening away the market share of the dollar today.
So, Carlo, the one currency that is mentioned as a viable alternative is the euro, but the euro, of course, is hampered by lack of integration. It's just there is no such thing as a treasury bond in Europe. There's nothing like the liquidity that Shaukat was mentioning. And Italy is one of the big reasons. You are from Marconi University in Rome, a professor of economics, and I know that you've got quite strong strategic views on where we should go. So, Carlo, let me ask you, if the euro is to become a rival to the dollar, Italy needs to reduce its debt. Otherwise, Germany's not going to agree to a mutual debt instrument. It's not going to agree to a euro-wide safe asset. It's not going to agree to deposit insurance across Europe. All the things that you have with the dollar that we take for granted are still lacking in Europe. The euro is a half-completed project. And one of the main reasons for that is Italy. Talk a little bit about whether it's remotely realistic to imagine Emmanuel Macron succeeding in his goal of deepening the euro area by having these common assets, and whether Italian politics can do what Italian politics needs to do for the euro to become what its supporters want it to become.
Thank you. Euro is a political currency. So it has been used for creating a European convergence and making it stable a long time. So you can't assess the euro without taking into account its geopolitical and political mission. That is the only unifying instrument for the European Union. Of course, it is incomplete, and in terms of monetary area theory, the euro looks like a joke. Just a short example. The European nations kept the sovereignty on their national debt, but they transferred the sovereignty for repaying the debt, that is the budget, the monetary sovereignty, and the control of the exchange rate. One will say, well, this is a joke, unless when the European entity receives this sovereignty, gives back some flexibility. Then you can have a suboptimal monetary area and you can survive. But the condition of having Germany inside a multilateral agreement inside the European, or I would say Western Eurasia, implied an anomaly in technical, economic, and monetary terms. That is, each state is on its own without too much help. Okay, will this configuration of the Eurozone change? Well, I don't think so, because the change implies the consensus, particularly of Germany, on sharing some risks. And it would not be wise to ask Germany, particularly in this moment, to do that. They will not have consensus. So which is the solution? This is the reality. In any case, the system can survive, but for its future, Euro has to marry with someone, and the only possible husband is the dollar. Also, the dollar might have troubles. If we have time, we can mention 3 or 4 troubles that might have and still having. Then, if you search for solutions, the euro-dollar convergence inside a geo-economic architecture of a Euro-American market, mostly similar to what Obama proposed in 2013 to the European Union, what's called the treaty TTIP. Then you have a euro-dollar system that can be the first of the world and the pillar of stability of the global market, and the lender of last resort so big that can even handle an implosion of China in the next decade, where there is a growing probability that it might occur.
Okay, so that, I mean, a Euro-America convergence, I mean, that sounds like a great thing, but just sticking to where we are today and what's realistic, and something very relevant to this region. One of the reasons why people have been discussing setting up alternative payment systems is because of the Iran secondary sanctions. And Europe wants to continue trading with Iran, but clearly it can't, and no serious European company is going to risk being shut off from the dollar. So there's this attempt made in Europe to set up an alternative payment system, INSTEX, to SWIFT, that is, as far as I can tell, been stillborn. Nevertheless, and Shaukat, I'm going to get to you in 1 second, Attila, but and Shaukat and Carlo, you do have the political demand created there, even if there's been a complete failure to deliver an alternative to SWIFT,
a demand for
so that Europe can trade with Iran.
Sorry?
You are demanding to whom?
To both of you. Shaukat, though, I'd be interested in your views on this.
You first, you're more important.
No,
Go ahead.
You're both welcome to talk.
I would love to have a Pakistani view on that.
Sorry, the acoustics are a bit... But let me say on the dollar, if you allow me.
Move that a bit closer.
Sorry?
Move that a little bit closer to you.
The microphone.
Mike, yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You know, one of the... we always talk about the dollar and the role and the other currencies, and nobody has really made it to the global scene yet, due respect to Europe too. A lot depends on the ecosystem around the currency. The Federal Reserve is an institution with a lot of credibility globally. The head of the Federal Reserve is a known figure, and when he or she talks, the world listens. You cannot say that, with due respect to everybody here, you cannot say that for any other major central bank in the world today. At least that's my perception as a banker of 40 years. So apart from the depth of the currency, the backing of the currency, the people and personalities involved have to be such that the world listens to them, and the world is confident that if they are there, there won't be a crisis like you could have had in other currencies. So all I'm saying is that today, I'm not sure there is any other currency which has that ecosystem around it, which will create total global convertibility and global assurance that currency will be there when needed. as a security measure. So we have to obviously see if there are alternatives. But in my 40 years in banking, this was a topic in every debate we went to. Nothing has changed. The dollar is still there. The dollar has convertibility. The Fed has managed, on balance, done a good job. And the other central banks are important, but they are more European than global. And the only global bank today, central bank, is the Fed. And every country, I can't think of any country in the world which doesn't have a dollar asset in its reserves. That tells you about the globality of the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, China has been cutting its dollar reserves, but your broader point's well taken. Attila, sticking to this theme of whether geofinance tracks geopolitics, and the fact that geopolitics is changing quite rapidly, whereas the global currency status isn't. And I guess it's that tension that we're focusing on. Turkey is a very, very interesting vantage point. You're head of Istanbul Analytics. You're a very well-known Turkish economic strategist. Turkey, of course, is formally part of the American geopolitical bloc. But in terms of it as a member of NATO and so forth, but in terms of its behavior, particularly under President Erdogan, it seems to be operating more like we're already in a multipolar world. Talk a little bit, if you can, about what Turkey would like to see and what Erdogan would like to see in terms of the dollar's primacy and in terms of China's role in the global currency system. And use your other mic too.
I think Turkey demonstrates clearly what the other two gentlemen have said, in particular the Honorable Ex-Minister, that dollar shall remain the king. The financial system doesn't follow geopolitics. It puts restrictions on how far geopolitics can change. Let me tell you what Turkey tried to do. Turkey hates our president. Our president dislikes the United States so much that he experimented with becoming a member of the Shanghai Five, which is not a Chinese restaurant, for those of you who don't know. It's a, okay. And he come up with the idea that as an alternative to dollar, countries should trade in their own currencies, which inherently makes sense in the case of Turkey, Russia, and Iran, because they sell us, hydrocarbons, and we sell them tourist packages. So even though it will not work perfectly because we do run trade deficits, there is some room for local currency trade. For instance, Russia could sell, or Iran, which sends us roughly 1.5 million tourists, they can sell their natural gas or oil to us in return for vouchers, which can be used for their tourists to drink vodka and consume our watermelons in Antalya while puking in our pools in the summer. After 5 years, $0, 0 rubles transactions made. It just doesn't work. Everybody wants dollars. Another thing is, of course, your financial ties determines how far you can maneuver in your geopolitical stance, in the sense that Mr. Erdogan would love to strike a deeper alliance with Russia and China and probably use their currencies. But the fact is we're indebted to Western countries to the tune of $400 billion. So you can't do that because Russia doesn't have the kind of capital markets where we can go every year and raise syndicated loans or issue bonds. And the yuan market, where we're going to try our first panda bond this year. My last point, Mr. Speaker, once again, just to reinforce what you have said. If you look at the dollar TL value and correlate it with the amount of stupid things our president said about monetary policy and our central bankers, you would see 99% negative correlation. Our president went on Bloomberg TV and said, when I become president, I'll take a more hands-on role on monetary policy. Next day, Turkish lira crashed 5%. He fired a central bank governor. Turkish lira goes down another 5%. So yes, central bank independence, the rules and other institutions that defend that independence, a nation that supports that independence is very important in terms of the value of that currency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So each of you look ahead a little bit to your China projections. China has gone in the last 20 years from being 3-4% of the world economy to about 16-17% of the world economy.
Closer to the mic.
Sorry?
Could you get closer to the mic?
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, because we don't understand well.
We're getting an
because
echo.
we have a sort of echo.
You're getting echo?
Yeah, I'm not able to get all your words, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah, so
can you
yeah,
lip,
no,
can
it's
you
the
lip
problem
read?
of-
I'm going to talk very, very clearly. Can you watch my lips?
Yeah, no, probably my
I
English
think
is
if
not
you
so
get
good.
But you can't.
If you get away from those mics, that's better.
Also, you
because
have
you have one
problem.
right here, which works better.
So your view is avoid this mic. Sorry for the technical discussion, everybody. All right, let's try it like this. Is that better?
It's better.
It's better. Okay.
Better.
If you look ahead at China and look at China's growth rates, even at the lower level that we're expecting, 4-5% in the coming years, and you combine that with Indian growth rates of 5-6%, then within 15-20 years, more than 40% of the global economy is going to be China or India. Does that change any of the things that you've said? The fact that America's share will continue to decline as part of the global economy, does that change any of your projections? And this is without, you don't seem to have entertained the political reaction to the secondary sanctions as a serious threat to the dollar. But America's predominance in the global economy is going to keep falling. Is that not a factor that you would take into account?
Yeah, these are factors you would take into account, but you also have to have a sense of realism. That if, say, China, if I understood
Sure.
what you said correctly, they have huge reserves, and a lot of it is in dollars. Of course, it's published, so you can go and check what it is. That requires both countries, United States and China, to have a certain ecosystem around them which will give people the comfort that this money is being kept with somebody who will manage it in the best effective way and transparently. And so far, history supports that. That if China has reserves with the Fed, for example, or they need some reserves somewhere else to meet their clearings, those issues have never been, they are there, but they have never been a cause of people getting out of the dollar for good. You could, of course, have a view on the currency and adjust your reserves accordingly. I think the global financial system, with the dollar playing a principal role, that suits the US too. So the US will be very careful in how they choreograph this in case tomorrow a dispute arises, in a way that the convertibility of the dollar and the safety of the dollar is guaranteed for everybody. Today also, if you look at China, I think the largest component of their reserves are in the US currency. And it's published, you can check it very easily, what it is today.
Can I rephrase what...
May I add something on
Please.
that, or you mind?
Continue.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, when we are talking about monetary relations and issues, of course, the dollar is at the center of the system and it's not going to change.
Yeah.
But there is a risk. And the risk, which is not at the technical monetary level, but at the global level, that is, how to simplify that? Okay, what the financial system is, so which is the quantity? It's at least 15 times bigger. The paper economy is 15 times bigger than the real economy. I apologize for this excessive simplification. Okay, if that is, the paper economy is something like more than $1,000 trillion if we assume that the global GDP is around 70, 75 billion or something like that. Okay, my point. If this mountain of paper economy goes down, the currencies, some currencies will disappear, and the dollar first. So today, in the financial system, we had the priority to keep these birds, paper birds, flying in the moment in which they have problems to fly. Why? Because there is a crisis of overcapacity all around the world. So money doesn't find opportunities, which the exception, luckily for me, in private equity. Okay, so this is a huge problem that cannot be solved through inserting more and more liquidity or that strange thing that is quantitative easing or the excessive use of quantitative easing in the monetary policy. And what you have as a solution, only a geopolitical or political one. Overcapacity means that there is no much industrial activity. There are no new things. No, the financial system became autonomous in more or less around the 80s and developed a leveraged growth of itself, now which generated this mountain of paper that should be sustained by a real development, but a real increase of mass capitalism around the world. But now we are observing the opposite, that is, the poor is becoming poorer and the rich is becoming richer, even in democracies. And this is creating a huge crisis. And the cure is not just more liquidity or helicopter money. Which is the cure? The cure is new development, new industrial development, and change. And also China is suffering a crisis of overcapacity and other disorders. There is a hole, a financial hole that might be 300% or 350% of the GDP, which is, yeah. So just I wanted to say, and sorry if I use too much of my time, but all we have the problem of saving our currencies, that is the value of money, and not the problem only of deciding who is in command, who is stronger or weaker. Unfortunately, this problem has not been recognized yet.
Okay, so you speak about the autonomy of the financial sector and the need for new things. I mean, one area where there's clearly autonomy, Attila, is in technology. Yeah. And one area where there is clearly a desire for a new thing is with the Libra currency that Mark Zuckerberg has spoken about, which has generated huge debate amongst central bankers about the benefits of a digital currency, what technology can do in terms of making transfer payments much easier across the world, across borders, but also the fear of the loss of sovereignty to a non-state actor. Libra would be based in Geneva. Now, Libra itself might not take off because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't appear to have handled the initial launch of this digital currency very well. Nevertheless, the example is there. At some point, we are likely to see some kind of a non-state digital currency that will be very convenient for all of us, like using Alipay in China or PayPal in America, but you can do this globally, but will also pose a huge risk in terms of money laundering, corruption, and as I say, loss of monetary sovereignty even by the Fed, and the Fed is quite concerned about what Mark Zuckerberg has been saying. Just to remind, Facebook's motto is move fast and break things. And that's not generally a principle that central bankers would adhere to. Attila, what's the likelihood that we're going to see a digital currency emerge, and what are the issues that we should be concerned about?
If I may, before I address your question, I want to take issue with these mechanical extrapolations of how much countries will grow in 10 or 20 years. Do you know that the calculations that show China, becoming the world's largest economy or generating 40% of the world's revenue also show Turkey becoming the 8th largest economy in the world? These are just stupidities. You feed numbers into computers and they give you results. Only countries that are run by consent, that build strong institutions, that advance the welfare of their citizens, and that create an ecosystem for innovation can grow fast. Someone in the previous panel just compared China to Orwell's 1984, where your credit card is connected to your political status, and I said, that's the end of China. China cannot grow under these circumstances. I will make the same criticism for my country as well. I pay no attention to those countries. China came this far because the gentleman after Mao,
Deng Xiaoping.
because he carefully and measuredly adopted certain parts of capitalism and liberalism. Xi Jinping is turning these back, and China will not develop. This is true for all of those emerging markets which will grow 7, 8%, 9, 10%. None of them will grow. Young demographics. Young demographics is a curse unless you find high-paying jobs for them. That's enough preaching. I'm going to go back. Now, Libra it won't because of Facebook. But to me, the end of dollar dilemma is a cryptocurrency. There will be a cryptocurrency that will dominate all the others because of what we call the natural monopoly theory in economy. You can't have two of certain things. This used to be true of the old mobile. You could only have one telephony company because it was the more efficient. It no longer applies to mobile, but in terms of cryptocurrencies, you can have only one because that would be the most efficient way. So there will be one cryptocurrency. I don't know which one it will be. And it will dominate all other payment systems. But it will be under the control of either a sovereign or a global monitoring panel. Global monitoring panel. For the simple reason that why do I use cryptocurrency? To hire escorts, to buy prescription drugs from Mexico, to do my cocaine trade, and to buy guns. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. I never bought guns with a cryptocurrency, but you know what I'm talking about. This won't work. Cryptocurrencies are awesome inventions. They have a future. They have thousands of efficiencies. They can't be broken into hack, etc. But as long as there is a world order, no sovereign or no collection of sovereigns will allow a private cryptocurrency to dominate the payment systems of the world. Allow me to finish. I'm sorry if I'm exceeding my time. Allow me to finish with one more world. This is one path for the world. According to the Reuters poll, the dollar will be replaced with something else, probably a cryptocurrency in 25 years. But there's a much more imminent danger of world splitting into three spheres, part of which are overlapping. A, the Tituclites trap? Tituclites, yeah. Well, to me, where I live in Turkey, Russia, China, and United States have started a Cold War. And it is quite feasible that we will have 2 iron curtains, 3 currencies, 3 segmented financial systems, 3 internets, and I won't be able to get Chinese food in Turkey. And 3 different currencies. A bigger problem, which I think my Muslim friends in this audience will understand, clash of civilizations. It is not a psychological or social problem only. It is becoming an economic, financial, and technological problem. At some point, if Muslim and other religions or faiths don't learn to live with each other, it will lead to separation, it will lead to different blocks, technology being denied to Muslim countries, immigration denied to Muslim countries, certain financial advantages denied to Muslim countries, or vice versa. And that's the third version of the future, when you develop 3 different blocks, 3 different currencies, and 3 different financial systems.
Okay, that's a fairly dystopian vision. Carlo, I know you want to talk about a more utopian one, and to do with...
About Turkey?
No, not about Turkey. About the Atlantic and your...
About China?
Your strategic... Your strategic vision for how these dystopias can be avoided.
So, very kind of you for asking me that.
Not at all.
It's a grand strategy issue. Solutions, it's not so easy. I'm leading a PhD program on geopolitical economy, which means that so you can't distinguish between economics and politics and geopolitics. Which is not totally true, but it's safer to think in this way in this period, in this historical period. Okay, we don't need a solution. Of what? First of all, the global market is in a process of regionalization. I would not say de-globalization, but mostly the global market has more boundaries than it has in 15 years ago. And these boundaries are reducing the flow of not only of people, information, and goods, but also they are reducing the flow of capital, of financial capital. And this process is currently under observation. Scenario A, okay, we will have a fragmentation of the global market into regional markets as it's happening. Yes, probably this is the reality today, but on the other hand, the economic interdependence among the major economic regions of the planet does not allow to exaggerate on that fragmentation for an historical reason. All the countries in the world generated economic models based on the export to the US internal market. Okay, so it's 70 years that the global growth is financed through the American deficit. The US is the only country in which the GDP is formed 70% by internal investment and consumption. All the rest of the world has a different proportion, where export is more important, or foreign investment like China. Okay, it means that the configuration of the global market is highly dependent from one center. And not many countries are ready to transform their economic model into led by internal investments and internal consumptions. Think about the European countries.
Keep it relatively brief, because we want to go to questions.
Oh, okay, sorry. I will. Oh, okay, so this is one scenario. Scenario A, that is the most likely to occur, is to have some regional blocks where capital will circulate more inside the blocks than outside. Can this thing survive? Well, the financial system will be fully reorganized if this happens. And the paper economy that I mentioned before probably will collapse. For that reason, but there is just 1 minute, but there is another trend that can be observed in many details which are important, that is a contrary one, that is a reglobalization, though this reglobalization seems to be selective. That is a market of democracies versus a market of the countries of market, let's say, the Chinese sphere of influence. For many reasons, this is happening mostly for political reasons, but also because China is a little bit naive, so it's been too much aggressive, and no one wants to have the Chinese around. But for the democracies, which have an internal crisis of consensus, and they need to mobilize more capital for creating jobs and so on, China is the perfect enemy. It's an authoritarian country, has made a lot of mistakes in foreign policy, is too much arrogant. And so there are two tendencies now: the fragmentation with the huge problems and the selective reglobalization.
Okay.
So we have to choose at a certain point.
Right.
We have to choose. What do you choose?
So
I choose the selective reglobalization, that is the formation of an alliance of democracies with a Euro-American nucleus, which will have also the size of the lender of last resort that will allow to the crazy financial system to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. I think we've got time for 2 or 3 questions. I'm just trying to strain because they're on the screen. Al-Badr al-Shatari. Al-Badr al-Shatari.
Yes,
yes. Forgive me if I've mispronounced.
Okay, yeah, thank you. No, you pronounced it correctly.
Oh,
I just want to bring the subject into the geopolitical and the economic system or the financial system. Now, I agree with Prime Minister Aziz that the dollar is the center of the financial system. But now the question I have is geopolitical, and the question is people who are questioning the U.S. commitment to the region. They are basing it more on a hunch rather than a real calculation. The dollar hegemony depends to large extent on oil, because oil is nominated in dollars. So in this case, people who are talking about the retreat probably should rethink, because the U.S. commitment is not only for oil export, which the United States is self-sufficient, but also is because it can print more money as long as the oil is nominated in dollars. If that were to change, I think the dollar hegemony will not collapse, but will decline. That's one. Secondly, is there any alternative for Europeans and other countries to create different financial system as an alternative to the dollars in case of the case of Iran, where the United States is not allowing the dollar transaction, and creating another system where those transactions can take place. Thank you.
Okay, so Shaukat, the dollar-denominated oil, I mean, it is worth mentioning in tandem with that question that China has started to redenominate its oil contracts in renminbi. That is a fairly significant development. But please.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Because we are having difficulty hearing you. But I will guess what you said. Let me put, with permission of the chair, everybody at ease. First of all, the dollar is not going to go away. Please relax if you have savings in dollars. Sleep well at night. It is a global currency. It is one without challenge at the moment. And all these comments we get that, we'll sell this for this currency, so the dollar will be affected. The fact is, currency is more than just holding an asset. It is also about convertibility. You want to have the ability to move it, convert it. And very few currencies in the world, I would say none in big amounts, if you're talking about billions and millions. The dollar is one of the only ones which has that strength to do it. And even if somebody in the US wants to change it, it'll be very difficult, number one. Number two, I think currency is also about convertibility. And if you look at the depth and breadth of the dollar, that's one of the few currencies where you could do millions and millions, and it happens every day in markets where things are being converted from dollar to...
The question was about whether oil would continue to be denominated. It was more specifically focused on oil.
Yeah, the question was about oil being...
Dollar-denominated, that being...
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason for any oil-producing country, and there are many represented here, so maybe they could have a better view. But I don't see any reason why oil should be shifted from dollar to some other currency. It has served well everybody. Oil price is quoted in dollars every day. It's converted every day. And there has been no issue in terms of dollar creating a problem for oil. Currencies, no matter which currency you choose as a medium for selling oil, will have ups and downs. But dollar has the depth and the breadth to take care of not just oil, but many other exchanges which take place every day. Global trade. Most of those invoices are in dollars. If you, having worked in a bank, even in so many countries, every time the invoice came, it was US dollar. Very few euro, very few others. So the point is, the system works. Tell me if there's a crisis of convertibility. I don't think there's a problem with the dollar. And other currencies are also there. If the buyer-seller agree on a third currency, that's up to them.
Okay, so sorry, we're going to take all the questions at the same time. Forgive me, I have a different method. So the next, so first of all, Ahmed Kasim.
Yes, here.
Yes, please.
Here. My question is for Professor Pelanda. You have mentioned that money doesn't find opportunities in a market environment where paper economy, as you called it, is 15 times larger than the real economy. So my question is this: is this feeding inefficiencies, especially when it comes to public policies, specifically economic policies? Because as the money fails to find opportunities in the abundance that it is served nowadays especially, does it go and finance, for the sake of spreads of one kind or the other, policies which are inefficient and unsustainable, making them or rendering them an opportunity to prolong themselves? For example, a country with a low ratio of public debt does not suffer as much as it should probably suffer if it offers handsome spreads to all those holders of dollars, who finds it hard to come by new opportunities, making the whole world or global economy bound to suffer inefficiencies.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple more questions, and then we'll allow the panelists to answer the relevant ones. Mark Brzezinski.
US-China. The US-China relationship is one of complex economic interdependence, and that interdependence is one of the key sources of global political and economic stability. So building on Ed's question to the panelists to look ahead at the geofinancial map, have forecasters taken on board how bad things can get in US-China relations? I've just come in from Beijing, and the Chinese are convinced that the Trump administration is weaponizing US law enforcement tools and even national security tools like CFIUS to crush legitimate business competition. TikTok coming under CFIUS review is something that really surprised the Chinese. And on the US side, with Donald Trump increasingly politically cornered, it's not impossible for President Trump to tweet that the US is going to default on its debt to China and please his political base in so doing. And a big change I've seen in Washington is how much more negative leading Democrats are on the Sino-US relationship now more than ever before. So this year is the 40th anniversary of normalization of relations between the US and China. The relationship is truly in a brittle place. The trajectory is not good. Have risk analysts truly taken on board how brittle this space is?
Thanks, Mark. And then finally, we've got Elena Suponina. Elena Suponina.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm here. Elena Suponina from Russian Institute for Strategic Studies. Trump's administration is using sanctions as a tool more often than any other administration. My question is about Turkey first. What's the impact of this policy on Turkish economy? And also globally, how negative is this kind of policy on global economic? Thank you.
Okay, so we've got three questions, very good questions there. Each of you has, I think, one directed more to you than the others. So let's start with the last question. Attila.
First of all, I don't know if this is just the way people speak or if it reflects your thinking, but I would like to make a distinction between Trump and American policy establishment. There may be some overlaps, but Trump doesn't reflect American policy. To me, as long as Trump is in power, these trade wars in the most insane form will continue. I subscribe to American Psychiatrists Association, who simply said the guy's mad. Oh, it's just so. But the power struggle between the United States, Russia, and China is real. It doesn't have to take the form of weaponization of trade policy. It will go on in other areas. It will go on either until one of the three hegemons dictate to others the terms, or they will agree on new terms of conduct. Now, as far as it comes to me, once again, Mr. Erdogan's friendship with Trump has not helped him to get out of any dilemmas so far. Mr. Trump promised to pull American soldiers out of Syria by 12 noon. By 5 p.m. they were back in Raqqa. I don't think Turkey can avoid American sanctions unless Turkey develops some kind of a relationship with the Congress. Three things need to be done. A, I'm sorry, we won't use your S-400s. We may mothball them. Two, I'm sorry, our alliance with you doesn't work, not in Syria. Three, we will have to account for the alleged war crimes against the Kurdish nationals in Syria. I think, again, going back to my thesis, and these are my final words, I'm dystopian maybe because I'm 60. I used to be optimistic in my 30s. I see a world increasingly drifting away towards blocks between China, Russia, and the United States, and Turkey's habit of going into bed with Russia one night and the United States the next night is not going to work in Syria. And then there is Iran, which is our side guy. We will have to make that choice, and that choice will be dictated by what I said. We owe the West $400. We don't owe Russia that much.
Shaukat, could you take Mark's question on US-China, the US-China question from Mark Brzezinski, weaponization of finance, weaponization of trade? Doesn't this, you've got a strikingly nothing to see, please move along attitude to the world. It's all fine, as if nothing's really changed since Trump came to office, which has struck me. Mark's question challenges that there is a lot of quite dynamic, potentially very negative things going on, particularly between the world's two largest economies, the US and China. Could you address that?
Could I what?
Did you hear my question?
Not
This was a
clearly.
really long question. Did you hear Mark's question?
Yeah, I guess
You did. Could you answer Mark's question on US-China?
If I heard it correctly, that's the only qualifier I'll give before I answer it. The truth is that this question comes up in almost every forum you go to, China, US. The truth is that both countries need each other. Both countries have to deal with each other. There's no love lost between the two, but they realize that there's space for one and there's space for the other. And this may be a very unexciting answer to what people may think is a real conflict question. But the fact is that when you're sitting at the helm of a country like the United States, or China in this case, you are not looking for, you're looking for getting more points, but you're not looking for confrontation. You're not looking for physical, moving your troops, facing each other, that type of stuff. The US wants a healthy relationship with China. I'm convinced, I talked to the US people also, I'm convinced that they want a healthy relationship. At the same time, they don't want their turf to be taken away by anybody. So there is that conflict there. China, on the other hand, publicly and privately, they want, again, a good relationship with the US, but they want to also exert their own influence unilaterally across the world, which does run into the US in certain cases. So I think what will be needed is a very mature approach of both countries. And despite who's heading which country, I think that mature approach will eventually prevail. I don't see physical action, if you are referring to military action between the two countries at all. Shadow boxing will be there. There'll be use of other techniques to pressure each other. Could be even some sort of sanctions on both sides. But I don't see open confrontation. It does not suit anybody for China and US to have a real warlike situation. Having said that, there are a lot of positives in the relationship too. US is still selling a lot of stuff to China, and Europe is too. Take aircraft. The number of aircraft sold to China by Europe, by Airbus and Boeing, is a record. They are the largest customer for both. These are thousands of jobs in both countries or both areas. Sure. So there is an economic benefit coming to all sides. The day it stops, you could have some other factors coming in, but I don't see, having talked to the people on both sides, I don't see that level of hostility. I do see some discomfort. I do see, speculation, what if this happens, that happens. But the relationship, the priority on both sides is to maintain a good working relationship.
So we've got 2 minutes left, Carlo, for you to answer the question about financialization.
No, what was the question was, what about the overcapacity crisis, which has huge financial implications? Well, there are two alternatives. First, you deleverage, but you cannot do that because this will cut at least 60% of the income of the people around the world, at least in the northern hemisphere. So you can't deleverage. In fact, the paper economy has not been deleveraged after the crisis of 2008. Then what to do? You need more development, more people gaining more money and saving more money. But you need to move money faster and to have a real growth, that is skills, more productivity. Then through this, you can save the world, can save the savings. For instance, just, last summer, a huge American pension fund investing on my private equity funds asked me, can you make a research where the question is, where will we be able to pay pensions in 2050? The answer under this condition is no. And this has generated a new type of research. But so we cannot go too far from reality. That's the point. We have to go back to reality. And means development in classic terms. Means people working, of course, in new technology. How you stimulate the concentration of capital for having a stronger technological revolution and the investment on a human capital in order to teach the people how to be part of the technological revolution. It's a huge amount of money, okay? And this huge amount of money implies a good reason. And I'm sorry to say that, going back to the Chinese issue, some competition, not a cold war between America and Europe with China for creating a new space economy, for the new cybernetics, for all these new technologies, and some hostility, some competition. I think, though it doesn't look so pacifist, that probably it's the best scenario that we can envision in this moment. Thank you.
Okay, well, on that relatively optimistic note, I think we began with you being not able to hear me, and I think we're ending with you not being able to hear me, but I heard what you said, yeah, and I'm not going to repeat myself, Attila.
Did you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah? Did anyone hear what we said? Good, good.
But anyway, thank you very much for everything that I heard and learned today, which was extensive. So please join me in thanking the panel.
The next panel starts now. The next panel starts now. The next panel starts now. The next panel starts now.
Okay, no problem. 5 minutes and then come back. Not working.
When we get to question and answers,
Yeah.
obviously you know the doctor is controlling the screen.
Okay. Start. Is it okay? Okay. Okay, start? Okay. 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 Hello, everyone. We're going to start panel 3 session. Okay. Okay. My name is Dr. Chan Yum-yoon from California University. I'll be chairing this session. And my major is cybersecurity and also artificial intelligence. So this is the right topic that we're going to discuss about this session. And this session is about global geotechnological mapping for artificial intelligence and cyber capability distribution. Okay. First of all, my background is cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, and I'm teaching at the moment at the California University MSc Cybersecurity, and this topic was very much demanding in this region, and also at the same time, AI is one of the components that we'd like to discuss in this session. And as you know, AI is kind of old technology, in 1950s technology. Why happening right now? That's very intriguing. You have to think about why we have to consider, not then, why now? Why now in artificial intelligence right now? It's because of due to the advance of computational power and data that we have collected in the past. Actually, memory was very expensive then in 1950s and 1960s. But now memory is cheap, and because of that, and able to store in the data in the cloud, and we can able to use the big data analytics in order to use this technology, so that we can able to do this in the right way, give a good prediction for the future. And this section is very much so that we want to discuss in the panel 1 session, panel 2 session. They discuss about AI. And AI is upcoming area. And we're going to discuss this with our distinguished panel here. Let me introduce Dr. Mark Abdullah. Okay, he is the CEO of SaaS. Okay, and his expertise big data analytics, and also how to analyze this data for the future and using artificial intelligence and machine learning in that area. And also, I'd like to introduce Jean Rickley. And he is head of Global Risk and Resilience in Geneva Center for Security Policy. And recently, he wrote a very intriguing book entitled Surrogate Warfare in the Transformation of War in the 21st Century. And I'm going to ask about this later, why this intriguing book that he recently wrote. And I'd like to also introduce Mr. Jian Yang. He's the president of Global Chinese Medical Association of Scientists. Okay, and he is very much linked with the medical and healthcare sector in China. So, without further ado, I will going to ask 5 minutes for each person to go through what do you really understanding about artificial intelligence, because there are many definitions. I think we have in the panel 1 session we mentioned about artificial intelligence, but how the artificial intelligence you define your understanding in conjunction with the cyber capability or cyber security in regard. Let's start with you, Dr. Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Chen, and thank you, Dr. Ebtesam, for hosting us and always providing us with the greatest challenge of really trying to understand what the current artificial intelligence and technology arbitrage opportunity is that we're all facing, whether from a military, a political, or an economic perspective. Number one, we need to recalibrate the way we think. We need to redefine power very, very differently. We were discussing at dinner last night, Napoleon and land armies defined power in the 18th century. British sea power defined what was global power in the 19th century. American air power defined what it is in the 20th century. The 21st century will be defined by cyber power. And we need to think differently about how we define that and what are the games and where are the engagement points. So thinking about what is this AI thing? It's this big nebulous kind of container of a nice acronym. AI has come out for 3 reasons, and you were saying a little bit about this, Dr. Chen. Everyone knows Moore's law, so every 18 months, computer processor speeds and memory doubles. So in the last 40 years, we've had a 1,000-fold increase in computer speeds. There's something also called Kreider's law, which is how efficient I can write my algorithm and my software to do more complex tasks. In the last 40 years, that's increased 43,000 times. So we have a 43 million increase in our computational power. Now, we have this Internet of Things. What is this Internet of Things? Sensors. So currently today, we have anywhere from, depending on who you listen to the estimates, 30 to 40 billion things connected to the Internet and talking with each other. That's big data, right? So bringing it back to now from a military strategic security lens, look at how we define success in an operational or tactical environment. We can go back to John Boyd's OODA loops. Observe, orient, decide, and act. So let me pose the question, because this is something that I worry about. We observe signals in the environment. Given those signals we observe, we have to make meaning of those things, right? We have to make meaning of, okay, what should I do? So now I need to decide. And then finally, once I decide what I need to do, I subsequently need to act. So we use that in the military security realm, also in the intelligence realm, of understanding adversaries. And we're always trying to get inside others' OODA loops. Let me pose the question. Man or machine across the OODA loop, who's winning? So, observation. Unfortunately, I'm limited to 5 senses. Machines, how many senses can they have? Well, if we have this Internet of Things, you can potentially have billions of devices providing signal, providing input on a sensor. Machines win hands down. Orientation. Given all this data, how do I make sense of it? What does it actually mean? So in complex, messy situations, human beings, we still have the higher order cognitive processing. But in well-structured environments using statistics or machine learning, machines are doing quite well. And we'll talk later about quantum computing, et cetera. So they can observe more. Right now we can orient better, but what about making decisions? In limited, well-structured spaces, machines can act much faster than us. What about action? The plane got here faster than I could ever run. So look what happened with AlphaGo Zero a few years ago. AI, which was not human instructed, there was no programming of any rules, within 70 hours, it learned to beat every master Go player in the world. Within 70 hours, it learned strategic moves that were passed down from generation to generation over 1,000 years. We need to recalibrate the way we think. We need to recalibrate our time frame, because there is a tipping point, whether you believe Kurzweil or some of these other folks, the future is coming. And what we do as leaders, as policymakers, will determine what kind of future that is.
Very good. Okay, let's move to Dr. Jin.
Right. Well, thank you first for the invitation. Dr. Calabi, it's very, very nice of you. I agree with what Mark said. The future is coming, the future is already there, probably, in terms of the way these technologies developed. You refer to the Moore's law, doubling power 18 months. In terms of algorithmic power, doubling period probably is 3.5 months. So which means that from 2012 to 2018, the Moore's law increased by a factor of 12, but the algorithmic computing power increased by a factor of 300,000 in 6 years. On a daily basis, it is estimated that we are producing 2.5 exabytes of data, which represent 250,000 libraries of Congress of data that are produced on a daily basis. So this computing power and the rise of the generation of data, and that will only increase. We're talking about 30, 40, 50 billion connected devices. I saw some figures to 500 billion connected devices by 2030. What we are creating, we are slowly translating our physical world into a digital world. And what you have is cyber has emerged as a fifth dimension in warfare, for instance, after ground, space, sea, and land. And it's not just a dimension, it's also an enabler for all the other dimensions. And this has tremendous impact because everything can be, once it is translated into bits, if you want, could be used very quickly. So the issues that we're facing right now is how do you control this proliferation? And the first panel this morning was talking about development of global military capabilities. This aspect is still out there, and you have two major players. Obviously, you have the United States and you have China. In the middle, almost no countries can compete. These two states are, if you want, setting the agenda about future research in terms of artificial intelligence. The Chinese model is state-led and based on trying to use AI first for surveillance purposes for its domestic population, but then exporting this model in a few countries already. The US model is based on free enterprise and for companies setting up the developments in the field. So if you think, in 2018, last year, French President Macron launched its AI plan. He awarded 1.5 billion in research and development over 5 years for artificial intelligence. The same year, Alibaba awarded 15 billion just for research and development in artificial intelligence. So what you have emerging is these two giants, but at the same time, you have the growth of companies that are becoming super powerful. In August last year, Apple reached the 1 trillion valuation threshold. That was the first time a private company reached that threshold. If you look at the World Bank, the ranking, 1 trillion is more than the first 184 states out of 200 on that list. You have one company that has more financial power than 184 states. So this is an issue. The third issue that has not been talked much about is that once your physical behavior has been translated into a digital behavior, the proliferation of disinformation is almost impossible to prevent, which means that through this technology, and artificial intelligence is just one, you have 5 disruptive technologies out there. It's artificial intelligence, quantum computing, synthetic biology, nanotechnology, and neuroscience. Once the code is out, the code is out. There's no way you can bring back the genius in the bottle. And this creates huge challenges in terms of security issues, because you're no longer faced by great powers engineering weapons. Suddenly, you can have people that have access to this technology. Just give you an example. Google has set up a database that is open access. It's called TensorFlow. On this database, you can download swarming algorithms. Swarming is when you put together different units, and they start to have collective intelligence. They can work like a flock of birds, if you want. Nowadays, with 3D printing, you can 3D print drones that you can weaponize. The Russians has announced earlier this year that they equip an AK-47 with wings. It's very cheap to manufacture. Think about that. You take hundreds of the flying AK-47, you merge them with a swarming algorithm. Think about the impact it could have in any society. You know, the international community, being based in Geneva and attending lots of meetings at the UN, is not prepared for that. Why? Because the growth curve of this technology is exponential. And governance and institutions think in linear terms. So what happens is that the more time passes, the more the gap increases and the more irrelevant we're becoming. So we are in front of challenges that probably we've never seen in human history. And I'm just talking about AI, I'm not talking about synthetic biology, where you can see the same growth patterns going on, the same democratization going on, and now you start people playing with kits called CRISPR-Cas9, gene editing tools that could cut DNA sequence to reconstitute, playing with their own biology. How do you regulate this market and this development? This is the big question of governance in the 21st century.
Very good. Yes. Okay. Panelist, Mr. Jian.
Well, it's a true honor to be here. I think this is my first time travel to Middle East. I think we spent whole 2 days trying to discuss important issues. I mean, within our life, within the society. It's such an honor. When I was young, I heard about this story. It's Aladdin's magic lamp. So Professor Chen asked, what is artificial intelligence? So to me, it's like the genie. So we open the lamp, we ask 3 questions, 3 wishes, right? I want to be the prince, I want to marry the princess, and then genie, you are free. So that's in the past, we're so naive. Now we're moving to the 21st century. So after explore the outer space, after exploring like the subatomic material, finally we come to the stage to looking through ourselves. We want to know what is intelligence first. After that, we can answer the question, what is artificial intelligence? So I agree with Mark, intelligence has many dimensions. You need measurement. Like to us, Chinese intelligence actually means 2 things. One thing is the censoring. You get the information, you know the world, you do your orientation. And then you do your analysis inside, but then how do you say something is intelligence? You must have a purpose, you must action out. So in Chinese, it's censoring the knowledge, and then you do the action, you exercise your capability. add together, that's intelligence. So I have some observation about artificial intelligence. I was being trained as a computer scientist, but acting as an engineer, and I also have a physics background. So thinking about that, what could the genie do if you can ask all your wishes? Like we go through the debate of the previous two panels. We're talking about the geopolitical power. We're talking about how do we create, jobs, better economy. All those are huge problems and big opportunities. So if we ask the genie, there are limitations on the physical side. Even though we're talking about the 5G, 6G, the bandwidth, well, we know all the material things has been limited by speed of light. And we're talking about the smaller scale, the nanotechnology, and we know we've been limited by Planck scales, which is much smaller. So no matter how powerful the genie is, there are boundaries. So thank God, this world still have rules. Well, since I'm coming from China, from Beijing, I do sense there are a lot of questions and a lot of people want to know about China, want to know how's our national leaders, their thinking strategy. I'm not in the position, to answer those type of questions, but I can answer from a Chinese point of view. So we do it very pragmatically. One thing is we welcome the artificial intelligence. So in the past, for elementary kids, the favorite school, private school, is learning English. Nowadays, it's learning coding. And also, we try to put artificial intelligence, put the genie, we make friends with him. So we're thinking, okay, so genie, tell me, what are your characteristics? So in the past, we're trying to capture intelligence in a way we learn from smart guys. So those smart guys, they are mathematicians, they are experts. So that's why in the past, we do expert system. We use symbolism to do the deduction. But then we find out, well, intelligence is out of the box, it's out of the rule. No matter how much rule we set, it's still not going to be enough. And then Turing comes. So this guy said, well, I don't care about intelligence, I treat it as a black box. So tell me your behavior. If I ask a question through two windows, one window give me some answer, another give me some answer. If I compare, human beings' answer and machine's answer are the same or equivalent. Then I treat that system is intelligence. And then we move to this age, 21st century, like Dr. Chen said, well, because the technology is advancing, because Marx said, well, it's many things colliding together according to Moore's rule, all that, and also our professor said, well, so many proliferations. So we are able to simulate our brain neural system. We call it connectionism. So basically, we put so many devices, so many computing power, connect them together, and then we let them play. Let them learn from the big data, a lot of information. Let it adjust the parameter, and the magic happens. We do facial recognition. We do a lot of things. Well, it's like a genie, like a black box. We don't understand what's the internal knowledge, but then it is so powerful. So we are at the stage, in the past, a huge supernation talking about the nuclears, and nowadays we're talking about artificial intelligence. Yes, the genie is out. So our discussion will be to see whether we can make the genie be our friends or not.
Thank you very much for the panelists. Actually, this topic is, the genie is already out, right? So how do you control them wisely so that we can have in the right direction? Actually, when I start working on the artificial intelligence, for example, in the cyber security perspective, a long time ago, if there is hackers or the attackers, they are attacking the system through the firewalls, intrusion detection system, and so on, and we cannot able to detect it because of anomalies there that cannot be detected. Because if the 0 days attack just happened now, then you cannot detect. If the virus that you just created today, just now, then cannot be detected. Just like that, new attacks coming in, and we cannot able to detect it anymore. But due to the artificial intelligence, now we have a chance to detect these anomalies. Because of the intrusion detection system, we are using artificial intelligence right now. So this is the way forward that we can able to utilize AI for our benefit. And of course, the enemy can attack us through many ways using artificial intelligence at the same time, but you can use AI to protect yourself as well. So this is the challenges I think that we have to consider. And the second question that I want to raise the question is that national critical infrastructure. We need to protect this national critical infrastructure. For example, UAE is in summer very hot. Imagine that you are out of power. That means no electricity. That means no AC. This is a major issue. Either attackers or the crackers and hackers, they attack our system, national critical infrastructure, then what are you going to do? You have to think about this, how to prevent and protect from the cyber warfare. Cyber warfare is here to stay, whether you like it or not. So I want to ask the panel that what your mitigation method, what your, the way that give a solution, in your opinion, then I'll be very grateful. Let's start from Mr. Jian first, because you started, Mark started first before, so Jian.
Okay, I'm an engineer. I try to build things. I'm not doing any destruction, so it's difficult question for me. But I play computer games, okay? So in a sense, we are all affair by watching the Hollywood movie is some evil guys controlling the super computing power and implant some smart program and try to attack, like Professor Chen said, well, summertimes in Abu Dhabi, well, the power is shut down. So how could we prevent such thing? I can tell one thing from computer science background. There is a Turing problem. He's been famous. There's one problem called a halting problem. So for any closed system, there's no way for you to make it error-free. There are always errors, something unproven or not able to disapprove. They're existing there. That's the nature of our logic system. So how could we prevent such thing? I'm going to throw a few suggestions. So one thing is like this. Why we first invite such a smart guy to get able to control our power grid? Because we are thinking they're so efficient. They help us to solve so many problems. So that's why we rely on those guys and rely more and more. So the first thing is, well, we need certain balance. No matter how smart the program is, how powerful it is, how convenient it is, we need some glitch, okay, to say, well, in order to do such task, you need to explain yourself. Make yourself public to tell us your heuristics behind your algorithm so that other people can trace, can track to say whether to prevent you to put some evil code inside. So that's one thing, to make whatever you do explainable, to explain your heuristic, your intellectual power behind that. And then it's a balanced system. That means, well, you cannot just do by yourself. There are always some other civilian power to check it out. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, I will leave to those two gentlemen. They are the true expert.
I think it's Dr. Jin. I think that's you wrote a book on in this area, so you should likely to answer this question more, in detail, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, so the book is touching on these issues. The argument of the book is that warfare in the 21st century are increasingly waged by state and non-state actors using both human and technological surrogates. Because of this diffusion of power, because of the proliferation of of the weaponization of these emerging technologies, we give more and more power to individuals. And so this has clear consequences for security policy and protection of critical infrastructure. Just take an example, for instance. In 2017, you had 3 college kids in the US that were playing the game Minecraft. And they were hosting a server and at one of Minecraft. They were making money out of it. And at one point, they decided we want to generate more money. So instead of improving their service, they decided, what if we attack competing servers so that we redirect the traffic and we can generate more money? That's what they did. Through a botnet. A botnet is a tool that takes your computer hostage and you give them information and they will log on a website and bring it down. But they were very clever because instead of using computer, they targeted connected devices. So a botnet attack normally of high intensity is about 100,000 devices being hijacked. They reach up to 600,000 devices. They generated up to $100,000 of profit a month. And at one point, they started to raise red flags. And what they did, they released the codes on the net. 24 iterations later, someone used the source code, attacked a company, DIN, that if you want to translate your HTTP address into IP address. And that almost brought down internet between North America and Europe. It cut Liberia from internet during 3 days. The origin of this, 3 college kids playing Minecraft willing to make money. So what is the impact? And you were saying that AI will help us in defending ourselves. Yes, that's correct. The problem is, the question is, which side between the defensive or the offensive and the defensive will win? McAfee is saying that they identify 100,000 new malware a day. 100,000 new malware a day. These are malware that you have identified. This is not zero-day vulnerabilities that you're not even aware that you're being attacked. Okay. So you can use AI, but at the same time, those on the other side will use also AI to be more offensive. As a matter of fact, if you look at cybersecurity, the offensive is always ahead. So, in terms of security policy and protection of critical infrastructure, all governments have inherited from a mentality of the Middle Age, which is we build walls and castles to protect ourselves. As a matter of fact, in cybersecurity, you are building firewalls to protect yourself. When you have 100,000 new malware that are produced on a daily basis, how is it possible to protect against this number? That's impossible. There was an interview, an op-ed recently in the New York Times from, I think, the legal counsel of NSA. I think the budget of NSA is about 60 billion. That the budget is not enough to cope with all the threats. So if the United States is not able to do that, forget it, that's impossible. So we need to shift our mindset from defense, which implies to identify a specific threat and you protect yourself, from defense to resilience. Resilience being that what you have to do is to guarantee that your organization, company, government, even though it is attacked, has the ability to recover and recover fast if it is attacked. Resilience means that you have to identify what your center of gravities are, harden this center of gravities, create redundant system, and then try to guarantee the basic function. And that is not easy because it requires to fully understand how your organization is working, and it means also investing a lot in foresight. And nowadays, we don't invest enough because if you take current development, by the time you will develop a solution, a policy response, it will be too late. It will have evolved. So what you have to do is you have to develop teams that are from very different backgrounds, not just engineers. You need to take people from all over qualification to actually think about possible futures, even the most dramatic one. I was recently attending a workshop at the UN by the UN Office on Counterterrorism. It was about emerging technology, weapons of mass destruction, and terrorism. One part was on AI, and they developed different scenarios. We never thought, when you talk about to people about terrorism, there are not many studies about agricultural terrorism. But now think about developing swarms of drones that could weaponize or some pathogens on crops or on cattle. This would have tremendous effect. Okay, this is not thought as being a critical infrastructure, but if, especially in part of the world like here, that are very dependent on food and water security, these become issues, that you need to think about. So you need a very broad spectrum. I mean, the time where we're thinking about security just in military terms is over. Okay, as a matter of fact, most threats will not be military. They will come from a very different avenues.
Okay, I'd like to ask you specifically to Dr. Jin regarding, you mentioned about quantum computer, right? Yes. Due to the advance of a quantum computer, and we have a major threat in the cryptography area because all the algorithm we have currently, RSA, Algamar, and DAS, all these can be broken because advance of quantum computers. So in your opinion, do we have to have post-quantum process algorithm need to be invented again? Well, what do you think about how to prevent this kind of attacks, in your opinion?
Well, again, the point is the same. For all of this technology, what we have to understand and focus on is which side, defense or offensive, will have the marginal advantage. Of course, when you have new malware, you can develop defense measure, but it's too late because it's already out there. So the question is, quantum computing, the big threat obviously is with cryptography because it will be able to break traditional cryptographic means. So, but it could also be used for defensive purposes. So the question is really the margin between offensive and defensive. The second aspect is how do we prevent things from happening? And so basically what you have a spectrum that starts from misuses. You develop a technology and there is an accident. That could happen. To malicious uses. So with misuses, what you can do probably is develop stricter protocol in terms of research to reduce the possibility that something goes wrong. The real issue becomes when you talk about malicious uses, because suddenly you have an actor who is willing to use that technology to do harm. And we have examples. The Aram Shurikyo sect in the 90s weaponized sarin and did this different attack in Tokyo, in the subway in Tokyo. And the idea later was to use a helicopter to spread sarin over the city of Tokyo. Similarly, the Islamic State, with an actor, with people that are ready to give their life for a cause, that potentially could have access to this technology, and as is willing to develop at industrial scale some of this technology. Think about ISIS. ISIS is the first non-state actor group that has developed an active chemical program with development means, with manufacturers of drugs. They took what was out of the shelf and they weaponized it.
Thank you.
When that isn't available, how do you prevent actors from getting access to this? And this is a major issue. And to be frank with you, the international community has no answer to this, because that would mean policing every human being. We are shifting from potentially a security paradigm of 200 states to potentially 7.5 billion individuals as a source of potential threat. How do you cope with that? You need to completely rethink the global governance security system.
So let's move on to Dr. Mark regarding this question.
I think what Jean-Marc's saying about resiliency, and so we think about resilient systems, we think about resiliency in a complex adaptive format. For policy, we talk about robust adaptive planning. How could I move faster than the competition? How can I understand? How can I hedge my strategy for the black swans, gray rhinos, or pink flamingos, the known knowns we have? Why is this? Is because you can put 30 coders together and you don't have a weapon of mass destruction, you don't have WMD, you have WME, a weapon of mass effect. So look what happened for Brexit. Look what happened in the US elections. In the US now we're all freaked out about foreign influence. Everyone who has an internet connection is a potential target of cyber. So I don't need $1 billion ship, I don't need $1 billion intercontinental ballistic missiles to actually go impact and project my power. All I need is internet access. It's a very different world. And it's a different world we need to think about as the nation state, and then we also need to think about as individuals. Number one, as the nation state, we can talk about power and cyber power and who's going to lead in the 21st century, US, China, et cetera. But ultimately, it's going to be the 7.5 billion people who now technology has become democratized. And so we see, you know, current difficulties in Iraq and in Lebanon and Chile, and it's about income inequality, it's about corruption, it's about lack of government delivering, as His Excellency said this morning, on growth and on hope. So we need to think very, very differently, and if we're going to have the same lens of looking at Cold War, hot war, et cetera, we always fight the next war with our last war's philosophy. Okay. And it doesn't work very well. This is a multi-spectrum domain where we need to look inside and see how are we delivering public goods and services, because ultimately it's your population, and it's the 7.5 billion people on the planet that's going to be your electorate, no matter where you are.
Very good. Okay, so now I want to ask Mr. Jian regarding because because you're involved in the medical field and industry, because of recently there are a lot of AI for example, I can give you an example like this. The GPs we are having now can be redundant anymore because AI can do better job than the GP itself, and the diagnostic point of view is much better, and also now also robotic surgery and so on. What kind of view on that?
Yeah, sure. We are now talking about intelligence, artificial intelligence, but what happened is looking through human beings' evolution for the past 3 billion years, it's the nature. They are mostly intelligent and produce us. So we need to think about this. What is the algorithm? Somehow evolved from just a single cell and to human being, and to human being to thinking about ourselves' future. So I think there are a lot of things we can learn from the biology, from human nature evolution. So some of the observation is a lot of redundancy. That will prevent errors. So just like you said, a lot of GPs, like the neuron, we have so many GPUs to do the multiprocessing, all that, and then you reach the final conclusion, well, maybe by democracy or by some other algorithm. So that's one thing. Another thing is the nature system, like for human body, I mean, we have lots of protection system. They're independent to each other. For example, we do know the immunization system. I mean, we have our skin to protect us from the physical environment. So we need multiple layers, and they are independent to each other, but they have the same goal together, that is to make our body more healthier. So it's quite interesting. We are in the 21st century. So when I was in the college, I've been told the 20th century is information century, and the 21st century is life science. So thinking about what are the doctors and also the life scientists thinking about what kind of knowledges or data they have right now, and then let's think about how dangerous or how advantageous to our human society. So right now, we go to any hospital, we do regular examinations, what you get is like dozens of parameters about your chemical and biological situations. But underneath of that, think about blood type. We have 4 major blood types, and we have 2 major diabetes, type 1 and type 2. But when you look inside, when you're looking through the genomics, the protein mix, the metabolism, and also glycomism, well, you get abundant information parameters. They're in the millions. And those are the detailed things, just like the subatomic things. They emerge together, gave us the major diseases, the outlooking features. So we are in the stage right now is we get a hand of all the information to describe what a human being's condition is. And it depends on us how to use that. In my opinion, is with artificial intelligence as our human's companion, we are the final decision sayer, but they are our friends. They are working relentlessly and grabbing so much knowledge to do the analysis, and like our genie friend, they handle to us. So what's your decision? Because as human beings, I mean, our society. So that's what I gathered from the medical world is we have so much data, so much information, and with big data, with supercomputing power, with artificial intelligence, I'm waiting for it doing much good things in our life. And maybe everybody's, I mean, today we're discussing that, maybe we all have 20 more years to live longer, and we're going to utilize that to explore, to create more good stuff.
Okay, thank you. Now open for the floor, so you have any questions, then you can ask. And for now, I'd like to ask Salam Al-Kuwaisi. Al-Kuwaisi.
Thank you, moderator.
I'm very sorry that I could not pronounce properly your name. Sorry, sir.
It's all right. Yeah. It's Salam Al-Kuwaisi. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists. My question is in line, you know, we've heard from the panelists that it's a global AI technology security and its proliferation to non-state actors is a concern on a global level. You know, back to O'Neill's phrase that all politics is local. You know, each country has, you know, its responsibility and its due diligence in protecting this kind of information. Would you think that this might prevail than maybe you know, a UN venture in trying to have a treaty globally? Thank you.
Okay, let's start with Dr. Mark. Okay, you want to take it? Yeah.
So you want to gather all the questions?
Okay, yes, yes. I think better take all the questions. Next is Patrick Bell. Where is Patrick Bell? No?
Right here.
Okay.
So, my question for any of the panelists is, given the multiplicity of challenges and threats that you've already discussed, and this adoption of a new mindset, it seems like we're not talking so much about platforms as we're talking about skills. And teach at the National Defense College, we teach critical thinking skills. And in particular, it seems like the question here is, what are the skills going to be necessary to allow governments and the people and, shall we say, society to deal with this new type of technological tsunami? But in particular, you referenced Clausewitz. Is there a need for a 21st century, shall we say, Clausewitzian trinity that will allow us to deal with this from a national security perspective? Thank you.
Okay. The next is Jafar Al-Tari.
Here, thank you
yes,
very much.
Please, yeah.
Thank you, some excellent presentations. We're trying to adopt AI in the energy space, and I can tell you it's very often artificial stupidity instead of artificial intelligence. This can be very challenging. So in your view, Is it that we don't know the resource requirements that are needed to actually adopt AI? Because there's a lot of underlying analytics, the need to move from machine learning to neural networks to deep learning. So is it lack of, we just don't know how much resource is required financially in terms of skills, or do we know what's required, but we're deliberately moving slowly because we want to validate, we don't know how to validate it once it's developed? Thank you.
Okay, now 3 set of questions. So maybe the last question may be appropriate to you, I think, Mark.
Sure. When you think about implementing any new technology, so you always should start off, and you want to make sure it's scoped small before you have the mission creep, and you want to understand both the promise as well as the performance of it. That's the only way you're going to be successful. So in software development, engineering, call them agile development, agile spins. So instead of the big, okay, I'm going to have an 8-year program and do something. You want to start small and then slowly test. So we call it VV&A, verification, validation, and accreditation of, is the data correct? That's usually the biggest uplift of getting your data in the right format. And then what type of tools, techniques? So should I be using a neural net, or should I be using a support vector machine? Because you want to know what each thing does to help get the question you want. But if you take those slow steps, and as Jan Tian was saying, it is engineering. It isn't like you're sitting there and saying, "No, I'm going to do this." It is best practice engineering to get there. So, but I wanted to answer just real quick, and then I turn it over to my colleagues. How we need to think differently. For example, these violent extremist organizations and non-state actors. The reason why Daesh or any violent extremist organization has power is not because of its ideology, but because of the governance gap. They have no future, no opportunity, and if I was in that situation, I'd be risk acceptant, I would take the exact same path. So it's how can we leverage the technology, because they're going to be doing it to us, to counter those kind of messages. And that's kind of all the influence operations stuff.
Very good.
Sure. First, and maybe the skills. Again, the point here is not to say that these technologies are bad. They will bring enormous positive development, that's for sure. The problem is that all these technologies are dual use. So if you probably in the future will be able to cure cancer by identifying specific cells and send nanodrugs that will kill the cancerous cell. If you're able to do that, nothing prevents you from actually not killing the cancerous cell, but killing the functional cell. So the question is, how do you prevent that from happening? So in terms of skills, and we're not talking here about artificial general intelligence, this is when when a artificial entity will have cognitive skills similar to human beings. We're talking just about what we have now. And what we have now is called weak artificial intelligence. In a way, it's stupid. It has been trained to do a specific task. But if you, as a human being, is pitted against, in competition, this specific algorithm, you stand no chance. So any jobs that involve repetitive tasks will be replaced by automation. That is for sure. So in terms of skills, what do you need? You need to develop critical thinking. You need to develop skills that have to do with emotion, empathy, creativity, because we are not yet there. Maybe in the future, again, we don't know, but these are key skills that you have to develop. Now, in terms of the new Clausewitzian Trinity, question by Mr. Bell, read my book because we are actually talking about that. These technologies are completely changing Trinity between government, army, and population, and the link between the population, armed forces, and government is being broken with this use of surrogates for different reasons, one being that it shields you against economic and political risk. The question about UN treaty, Again, the problem that we're faced here is because it's dual use or multi-use, some say, the nature of this technology. If you take facial recognition could be used for many good purposes, but it could also be used and being militarized. So how do you stop things from developing in this direction? That's the first issue. The second is the speed. You might have heard about deepfake. You take a digital support and you merge it with another one. You take, for instance, my picture and you merge my face on a video. This technology did not exist 5 years ago, was not commercially available 18 months ago, and now we start to see clear security implications. There are more than 15,000 videos already online on this. They have been viewed, most of it's porn videos. They have been watched more than 130 million times already in 7 months. Researchers in Tel Aviv earlier this year made an experiment. They hacked a medical imagery center. And they use neural networks to change the MRI picture by adding tumors, removing tumors. And then radiologists were shown with the pictures. 100% of the radiologists were fooled by the images. How many of your medical imagery centers are being protected against such attacks? Against a technology that did not exist 5 years ago, was not commercially 18 months ago. That gives you the pace at which you have to be reactive. So in the UN, there has been since 2013 a governmental group of experts on lethal autonomous weapons system that meet twice a year normally, and the idea is, shall we regulate on development of autonomous weapons system? After 6 years of talks, I can tell you that the answer is no, because since 2016, especially because of AlphaGo, because also the US published a study on autonomy that said that autonomy is a silver bullet for future conflict, the race is on. So if there is no political interest, there won't be any treaty. So again, regulating this field at the margin will be possible, but you cannot create a fail-proof system. And the problem is that if there is a gap, this gap could be exploited, and the power that this technology provides to individuals or other actors is enormous. And maybe we don't have the luxury to experience that kind of weaponization by people who don't want to have access to this technology.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jin. And Jian?
So I will address the first question. I totally agree. I mean, all policy is local. Even though we're thinking about artificial intelligence, we think it's so powerful. I mean, someday they can control human beings, but in reality, it has so many flavors. So nowadays, what we are in a stage is called specific domain intelligence. So we don't have called AGI yet. It's artificial general intelligence. So, and the artificial superhuman intelligence is only in the science fiction. So totally agree with you is we're going to use our each country's nation's advantage to develop, to utilize artificial intelligence to augment us in the field which we feel comfortable, which we have an advantage with. So for example, some country, maybe German, can be very good at the intelligent manufacturing. Maybe Japan can be very good at intelligence, like medical things like that. So we're talking about individual domain, just like experts now become national-wide expert. So the second question is whether our government are ready, have the AI skills to make such a decision, which to open up the genie. Yes and no, as always. So I think there's nothing to prevent people trying that. Now, we're talking about nation. Actually, nowadays, it's a private, huge company. Sometimes they have more control over the nation. So there's no way to stop them because they're in a fully competitive, world. But I think there are something related to general public, and the nation should have some rules, regulations regarding how to use AI technology. And I agree with that is we need more patient, we need more observation before we apply something. So maybe one recommendation is, well, start from now. For the countries, they want to utilize AI to make huge decisions related to public safety or public health. They're going to sit along the AI system, maybe the decision system, together with the human system, and then try to compare that to see how effective those AI augmented system to get, compare with the human team. And the third question is very interesting about artificial stupidity. Well, Albert Einstein used to say, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So I think what he referred to is the nuclear power. It's us.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, artificial intelligence, I'm trained as a computer scientist engineer. When you rip through all the coding, all the layers, and you find out where is the mysterious, where is the intelligence? There's nothing there. Like an onion, you peel one thing. It's an emergent thing. So at least it's the current stage. So I'm thinking to echo with Mark Briskin. So I think I thank you, your wariness about the confrontation between US and China. So, well, since I studied my college in the US, I benefited a lot from the higher education system of US, and I'm a Chinese. So naturally, I want our two countries, getting along with each other well, but I think we are human. And there are a lot of things, it's by human nature. We want to control things. We are greedy. So maybe with artificial intelligence, with something like almost as smart as human knowledge, and we're looking through our past history, all the ancient wisdom, those guys, well, we can invite them into our system. When we try to reach decisions, we always consult with them. It's like an oracle, but created by ourselves. So to conclude myself, I want to make one very constructive, concrete answer between US and China. We worry about the financial issues, whether the US dollar is dominant and RMB trying to use one belt, one road to control more countries, and or China trying to use the cryptocurrency, to get more partners into the world. I think there's no way we can avoid that. It's an open world. But as two big nations with so many power behind us, it's going to be embarrassed, like we just fight like kids. We have so many other friends all around. Okay, we need to behave well. So my suggestion is, instead of, let's say, AI competition as the sexiest nuclear power, let's do something else. So we find some problem which related to all our human beings, maybe like public health. There are so many people, they live in the rural area, they're short of doctor, they're short of many, like a medical supplier. So the US, there's one time almost go to bankrupt because of the healthcare insurance. Same thing with China. We have 240 million elderly people, and we have over 200, well, I have some number here, which is very scary. Yeah, we have 266 million people with high blood pressure. Those are diseases with 420 million people, they have a high blood pressure, potential problem. And for diabetes diseases, we have 120 million people. So those issues are large. Instead of just talking about the old way, how much military power we possess, and how much money I'm dominant, I can just print out the money by ourselves. Let's think about the other way. So how much goodness you do to the world, that earn you the power to enjoy your life. So maybe what we can do is we do this kind of artificial intelligence invitation. We compete to solve the human difficult problem. And whoever gives the most, there could be multiple answers, multiple opportunities. especially to the economy and jobs. I think maybe I'm just thinking very broad about the direction. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, due to the time, we have to cut it now. So let's thank for the panel. Thank you very much for your intriguing talks and everything. Okay, thank you very much for everybody. Thank you.